All right, Sam, thank you so much for joining me here on the Good Times Alchemy podcast. I'm really excited to hear more about Third Place Bar. It's always so exciting to see people doing pretty much exactly what I'm doing on the other coast. But I think even more importantly, I think, at least for myself, I feel like there's not so many of us. So whenever I see someone
hmm
who's doing the same thing, I just feel like I gravitate towards them and just want to just go down the rabbit hole of looking at all your content and all the things that you've been doing. But I'd love to just start off with, I know you've been throwing pop-up events, but I'd really like to just first talk about your experience in the non-alcoholic community in the
hmm
space and how that went for you. How long has it been of your journey with sobriety and just starting off there?
Yeah, so I'm pretty new to everything. It's been less than a year for me of quitting drinking, running third place bar. Those two things overlapped. Funny enough, everyone always thinks I stopped drinking and then started third place, but I actually had the idea of starting something like third place bar way before I stopped drinking, like 6 months before that. Mostly
Hmm.
because I found myself going to bars a lot and drinking more than I wanted. And I live in New York City, so I thought, wow, why is there nowhere else to go after, let's say, 7 o'clock at night after the last coffee shop that closes? Why is there nowhere to go other than bars where I feel like I should be drinking? That's so stupid. It's New York City. Everything here is possible. So I'm going to start a non alcoholic bar. But I never actually considered for myself that I could or should stop drinking as part of that too. I basically just
Hmm.
got into the whole sobriety community and into everything, just basically doing research for the bar, and then realized, wait, should I maybe stop drinking too, just for to see what it's like? And I did, and I stuck with it because it was awesome. This just
That's
all just
awesome.
happened almost like accidentally for me. Like about, yeah, it's been 10 months since I stopped drinking. And I started thinking about doing third place bar about 6 months before that, even.
Okay, that's awesome. And so the concept, I'm guessing, is you want to get your own brick and mortar
Yeah.
for third place at some point in time, but you're
hmm
doing these pop-up events. So talk to me a little bit more about how those have been going. It seems like you've been doing a lot of different types of themes or different events. So I'd love to hear just how that's been going.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I initially started out saying I just wanted to be a bar environment. Like I literally just want to take over a coffee shop after hours, 1 or 2 days a weekend, and then just have people show up. No tickets, no RSVP. We're just doing regular bar service. And I did that all of January. I had RSVPs just to send people reminders and get people on the mailing list and everything. But it was really just 4 weekends, like 4 Friday nights of just bar service. And I had board games and stuff and goodie bags, but it felt really hard to get people to actually come out to something that's, oh, it's a bar, but without alcohol. What am I supposed to do there? And so I pivoted a little bit and started doing more like entertainment, basically, more activities. So I had a trivia night, I've had a comedy night, we did a big like outdoors picnic in summer. I collaborated with a few other businesses to do a sober drag brunch. I'm currently planning a like zero proof cocktail pop up at a vegan restaurant, my favorite vegan restaurant actually in Brooklyn. So it was basically just a slight pivot from, okay, it's just a bar and people show up and just do whatever they would do at a bar. Kind of the concept I want to get to with the brick and mortar location. But I just realized for the events, for the pop ups, it's a lot more attractive for people and also a lot more fun for myself, I guess, to just, to do events and to do fun stuff and to do hands on activities like a trivia night or cocktail classes or whatever. Um, but on the other hand, it is very exhausting, like significantly more exhausting than just like setting up a bar and then bartending. So I'm also very excited once I have a brick and mortar location to, I always say, I'm going to have other people running events at my place so I don't have to do that anymore.
Totally.
Because like event planning it's a lot of work, but it just seems like more effective in getting people to come out and having a good time and everything. So I'm just going with that for now.
Nice. And what past roles I'm guessing you've been a bartender in the past. Would love just to hear like what type of from your past roles as a bartender or
Mm-hmm.
any type of jobs, what do you
Mm-hmm.
think really helped you work on
Mm-hmm.
your program now that you're trying to start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really like that. So Yeah, I bartended not too long, to be honest, like maybe a year in college. And it's funny because I make cocktails now and teach cocktail classes, but I always say I was never a cocktail bartender. I've only ever worked at a dive bar where like the most exciting cocktail I made was a gin and tonic. Like it was like very divey, but we had concerts and stuff. It was a fun place to work. Rough. Like we went till 4 a.m. It was,
Oh yeah,
and
nice.
have you worked in hospitality? Have you bartended?
Oh yeah, for the last 20
Yeah,
years.
and it's
So
like
yeah.
the whole like it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you're closing up, you're walking home, like the sun is rising and you can hear the birds. And it's always like whenever you hear the birds, when you're going
Oh
to
yeah,
bed, like you question your life choices. So
for sure.
yeah, that was definitely the thing where I'm like, what am I doing here? But
Uh-huh.
it was a fun place and it was never funny enough, even though I was drinking quite a lot in college, I wasn't actually drinking at work, like hardly ever, and neither did the people I worked with. I'm not sure. I think it was maybe just that particular bar. Maybe it's also just that was back in England when I was living in Manchester for grad school. Maybe it's
Mm.
just like also the bar scene in Manchester is a little less intense than it is in New York City, for example, where just drinking comes with your job and people buying you shots and everything. That wasn't really a thing at my bar. Like I barely ever drank. We didn't do shift drinks or something. We were just glad to get out. Like
Yeah,
4 in the
right.
morning. So that definitely obviously helped just with like bartending, making drinks and everything, like just knowing. Also just doing like high volume. Like I said, we had concerts and stuff at my bar, just like, shouting over like loud dance hall music or whatever and taking orders and like running around, figuring out like who's next, that kind of stuff. And then the other thing I did that actually really helped is I ran a not for profit
Mm.
also when I was in grad school in England for women and girls who are in tech. So my background is I studied computer science. My background is like software engineering, data engineering.
Okay.
And as I was doing that, as I was in grad school, I ran this group for women and girls who are interested in science, technology, engineering, math, STEM. And we would run monthly, we called them Girl Geek Tea Parties. So we'd run like monthly afternoon workshops because I figured, which is such a funny callback from 15 years ago, I was also
Mhm.
drinking
Mhm.
heavily because I was in grad school in England. Obviously, I was like at the pub a lot. But I realized that a lot of networking events for women in tech were in the evening, they were at bars, they were at restaurants, and they weren't very accessible to a lot of women because they were either had to get childcare somehow, or a lot of people like Manchester has a large Muslim population. A lot of people were like, I don't feel comfortable being at a bar where alcohol is served and where the people around me are drinking. So I
Right.
basically said, how about we just do something Sunday afternoons, right? Where that is accessible, that if you want to, you can even bring your kids. They have to be able to sit still maybe for a couple of hours, but you can bring them along if you want to. And then some of the workshops that we did were even like kid friendly. We did one of my favorite things I've ever done was a Christmas tree ornament soldering class. So they did
Cool.
flashing LED Christmas trees and stars and soldered them. And it was like a
Nice.
team activity and it was so nice. Um, so I ran those events and then we also ran like a bigger conference, basically like Women in Tech Unconference, where we had like 80 people or so, like in the entire, we took over the entire building, had two different spaces, organized like food, drinks, everything. And again, it's a funny like uh callback for me because even then, like all the food we got was vegan, all the drinks we
Mm.
got were non-alcoholic. Like even then, like it was just really, really important for me to make it accessible to everyone. And I still remember the shopping list for that event also included like a baby changing unit for the bathroom because someone emailed us was like, hey, I have a newborn baby. I want to bring her
I love it.
along, but do you have anywhere I can change the diapers?
Sure.
So even then for me, like accessibility was just a big thing. And I think that's how I just really taught myself like event planning, promotion, back and forth navigating venues, navigating suppliers, navigating volunteers or staff, like people to help out and everything. And I did that for 4 years, I think. The group is still
Nice.
going, which is awesome. Took a little bit of a
Yeah.
hit during COVID, obviously, like the in-person meetings, but they're still going like over 10 years later, which is amazing. And I just learned a ton during that. And then in addition to that, also just like me working in tech and doing like a lot of client-facing engineering roles, I think I just learned a lot about like communication, like making connections with brands, for example. Like you get a call, you do a thing where you introduce yourself, and This kind of, let's do a round of intros. Okay, let's sum this up. What are next steps? What are the action items? Right? Kind of just like having a structured way of planning and communicating thing that also helped me a
Yeah.
lot. So it was really like a combination of lots of different things I've done over the past 15, almost 20 years at this point that really helped me do third place
Nice.
bar.
Yeah, I think it's so great when the culmination of all your past experiences really help you in your newest endeavors. And I think that's something that rings really true for me. I remember just even being like a 14-year-old kid working at a coffee shop and doing a farmer's market and just being like, oh, wait, we have to have everything we need here. And of course we didn't, or I didn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared at all. And just looking everywhere to just get even just a simple cup of coffee to someone. It's just so funny how you just take from all those past experiences. But that's so cool. You ran a nonprofit and it's still going. I think I love that there's always those moments where you see the things that you've done in the past and now you're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing that full time now and making that my career, which is super fun. I was really excited. I just did my first event with Kaiser Permanente, which is with a healthcare provider out here in California. And it was awesome. And it was just so cool to see the same thing that you would see from a tech event or a nonprofit event. For some situations, of course, is, they don't want alcohol. They want to just have great non-alcoholic offerings. And I'm really excited to see that kind of transition from, let's step away from the alcohol. We're trying to do something here. We're doing a fundraiser. We're doing a get together. We're solving problems. Let's take that out of the equation and maybe we'll have a better outcome. Yeah. So that's been really fun to see. Now so along with all of that, I'm really curious to hear more. It seems as if you had this wonderful idea. You're still involved in tech. That's still your daytime job, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And I guess that's a good job to have because you have the flexibility to do things when you want to. But I guess my question is more of like, how did the journey of doing these events like lead into that? It makes sense to me. You're throwing these non-alcoholic events. I'm guessing you're not going to be drinking at them, but just if you wouldn't mind just like talking to me about how that journey went for you. What were some of the struggles that you dealt with when you were getting to that stage? And even now to this day, like where do you find yourself struggling and still staying true to your sobriety?
Yeah, it's pretty funny, actually. Like a lot of people ask me, so how did you manage to stop drinking and everything and stay sober? And I said, I never set out to quit drinking. I saw a lot of stuff where I saw myself because I didn't consider myself to be like a problem drinker in any way. I was definitely drinking very consistently since I was a teenager for 20 years straight, basically. And had a lot of like ups and downs from it, a lot of bad hangovers. Like my hangovers were absolutely like destroying me. Like I couldn't take in even a sip of water for like most of the day. It would just come right out. But it never occurred to me because I didn't think it was causing me that many problems. Maybe it was definitely like causing me some interpersonal issues and everything, but it didn't have necessarily like a big impact on my life as such. Like I was doing just fine. I had a job, apartment, friends, like it was fine. But I basically, like I said, I did research and was like, oh, maybe I should just stop drinking, and I didn't even think it was going to be an issue because I've done dry January before. And even though I would drink like very regularly in New York City, it's just what you do. Like a friend of mine just said, it's just called being an adult in New York City who has a social life. This is what it is, right? It's like, I said that to a friend the other day. I was like, Monday night, you go grab a drink with a friend to catch up. Tuesday night, you go out for dinner and have drinks. Wednesday night, maybe you stay home. Thursday night, you definitely go out, maybe go to a concert and have drinks. Friday night, you go to another show, you go to a club, have drinks. Saturday night, you do the same. Sunday, you do brunch. And then all of a sudden, you spent the entire week drinking without even
all week
noticing
long
necessarily. Yeah, exactly. And it was like that for me. I didn't even notice how much I was maybe drinking. So I was like, it'll be easy for me to stop for a while. I'll just do that. And it was easy for me to stop. Also because I was hanging out with a friend at the time who was straight edge. We would go to a lot of concerts together. And that was fine, especially being with someone who doesn't drink, right? Even before I stopped, I would not drink when I was hanging out with him most of the time because it felt like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to bother him with me drinking. And after 2 months, I took stock and I was like, because it was also like the beginning of dry January, like the middle of dry January. And I was like, wow, I'm actually feeling great. And it wasn't necessarily like a physical thing because I was in a pretty good shape. I was marathon training twice in a
Mm,
row. Basically, I ran a New York City marathon, had a month off, and then started training for the London marathon. So I never really had like physical issues from drinking, but my mental
mm,
health was like just got like a major upgrade. I had like very extreme mood swings,
mhm.
just like a lot of issues with emotion regulation, like my whole life. And I think I realized at some point that it turns out if you just keep messing with your brain chemistry from like when you're a teenager throughout like your 20s and 30s, yeah,
Yep.
like something's got to give. It will do something to you. And for me, it was definitely like my mood, my stability, my emotion regulation that was absolutely out of control. Like I had so many highs and lows and I would snap and it was really bad. It was a lot of like turmoil internally. And that just went
Mm,
away. And I was like, this is great. I don't want to drink. I don't want to get back to that. I'd rather just be like kind of chill. So that was actually really easy. And then at the same time, again, like I said, that was the same time that I started Third Place Bar. So I also jumped like headfirst into the whole non-alc like beverage space. And
yeah.
I'm just like naturally curious and love experimenting and love trying out things. So I just kept experimenting with all these drinks, buying all these like beers and cocktails and going to lots of different bars and restaurants and trying out their NA cocktails and just figuring out what I like. Because it was a whole new world, a whole new kind of range of flavors and everything. And that was exciting for me too. And that just kept me really busy. Yeah. And it's been shockingly easy for me, mostly because I'm like, I don't want to go back to that.
Right.
I literally just don't want it. Like it's like when you
Right.
find out you're like allergic to something that you never really liked that much anyway. Like I wasn't like, oh my God, like drinking and alcohol is like the best thing ever. And I didn't have any kind of like
Right.
physical or mental like dependency on it. So for me, it
Mm,
was like, okay, I'm just not going to do it because this is significantly better than any alcohol could ever be for me. It's
yeah.
like totally like the way I feel right now is
Yeah.
like here and the way alcohol tastes or make me feel is like here. I'm like, yeah,
Yep.
obviously I'm going to go for the thing that's like
Totally.
feels better like overall.
Yeah.
I do
Huh.
occasionally have moments where I'm like, man, like especially it's really funny. I hang out with a lot of people who are also sober and like somewhat
Mhm.
recently sober, like maybe a year or two, and we like hit it off really well and have an amazing time. And occasionally it comes up like the thought is like it would be really fun to get super drunk together. Like I have that sometimes where I'm like,
Right.
man, we would have had a blast just getting
Yeah.
hammered. And
Yeah.
that's like a little bit of a tempting kind of thought. But I have that like occasionally at like when I go to concerts or clubbing or whatever where I'm like, oh man, if I had a couple of drinks now, I'd be
Right.
vibing. But I just learned that it doesn't always have to be 100% super fucking awesome. But it's okay if it's like here, right? It's okay if
Right.
it's 80% good. And I'm
Yeah.
having a great time with that person. And it's not, oh my God, we're having an epic night out, one for the
Right.
books, where we get absolutely wasted. And oh my God, remember this? But we're still having a very good night out. We're having a great conversation. And I
Sure.
know I'm not sacrificing my mental health and like feeling like an absolute wreck or getting into a fight with people or being really sad or being hungover and like feeling like I'm wasting my life like
Right.
the all of the next day or even 2 days or whatever, right? Like it's like again the trade-off, like the net positive for
Yeah.
me to not drink always outweighs the potential quote unquote like air quotes, like very heavy air quotes, like benefits of having a heavy night out. What are
Right.
the
Yeah.
benefits other than, oh, fuck, this is really fun, but it's okay. I went on a roller coaster the other day. That was awesome. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
maybe I should just go to Coney Island more and ride roller
Yeah.
coasters and I have the same,
Exactly.
like, dopamine hit, right? And I'm not feeling hungover the
That's
next day.
that's really cool. Thank you so much for going into detail with that because I think at least for me, hearing other people's experiences really helps for whatever reason. But also, I think it just lets other people understand that there's a lot of different ways to get to
Yeah.
this point
Yeah.
and to find sobriety in any way you want to do it. And I think I went to a Modest Mouse concert last Friday and it was just epic. But it was so funny because I remember just feeling like that moment of, man, the last time I saw Modest Mouse was like probably like 10, 15 years ago, and I was wasted. And I just remember being like, that was a really fun time. But at the same time, I remember being like, wait, I just remember it being a fun time. I don't remember anything clearly. So I had maybe an amazing night, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember much of it. And I felt like shit the next day for sure.
Yeah.
Where now I'm going to this concert, I'm remembering everything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a pretty good time.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm looking at some other people around me who are like just dancing
Yeah.
like crazy and like full on having a fun time. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I'll get there. I'll get there. But then I remember just like getting to that point. I was like, no, I'm vibing out. I'm having fun. I'm
Mm-hmm.
dancing the amount that I want to dance. I'm
Yeah.
remembering everything, which is super fun. But then I got to go out and have a nice meal with a friend of mine afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered all of that. Got to have a good time. Got to talk about stuff. And just, it's funny how it all evolves and changes and
Yeah.
like your new version of fun. And I feel like
Yeah.
at the same time, you learn how to have the most amount of fun in sobriety.
Yeah.
And it's actually really funny because I had some coworkers. I'm still a bartender, so I'm a sober bartender. I work with alcohol around me all the time. And it was like this time last year, and I just remember like one of my coworkers being like, man, I would have loved to see you when you're like highs or when you were really drinking. I'm like, yeah, I bet you would. It's like those days are over. Too bad you weren't there. It's like
Yeah.
that kind of like fleeting memory of
Yeah.
there's some nostalgia, but there's
Mm-hmm.
also a lot
Yeah.
of
Definitely.
things got pretty fucked up during those times
Yeah.
too. Let's not put it too much on a
Yeah.
pedestal.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And one thing that I really think is really cool that you're doing, and I actually find myself saying, oh, I think I should do that too,
Mm-hmm.
is I was just looking through all of your Instagram and just like how you're putting things on there. One thing that I love that you do is you take pictures of the drinks of where you are or the
Yeah.
menus of where you are. And it's like a reel that just has all these different
Mm-hmm.
things that you've done over like a catalog of time. And I think that's really cool because I think, at least for me and my sobriety, and I tried 5 years ago to get sober and really
Mm-hmm.
didn't have I didn't get sober. And I think one of the main things for me back then was there was not a lot of options.
Yeah.
And now it's really cool for me to be in this space where there's so many amazing options. I'm
Mm-hmm.
tasting more and more. I'm seeing how people are utilizing it. I'm helping people utilize
Mm-hmm.
non-alcoholic. But I guess one thing that I'd love to just talk about for a moment is what have you found that you really enjoy?
Mm-hmm.
And then who have you found out in New York that you think is doing using some products to their best ability?
Yeah. So in terms of things that I really enjoy, like I love, like, I'm German. I like beer. So I'm always happy to just have a non-alcoholic beer, like even a Heineken
Heck
Zero
yeah.
is great. You've probably seen it on my Instagram. I love shandies. So whenever I get a little bit tired of just drinking non-alcoholic beer, I just order like a Sprite with it and make like a shandy, 2/3 beer, 1/3 Sprite. So you can still get like the bitterness, the hoppiness from the beer, but you also get a little bit of like sweetness and stuff. So it's like closer to maybe a beer cocktail. And I really enjoy it. It's fantastic in summer. Like I literally just had it here in Washington. Like I'm in Washington State at the moment, and we had a gorgeous day on Friday, and we ended up at an outdoor brewery and just had athletic brewing, like the athletic cerveza with Sprite, and made us some shandies,
yeah.
and it was fantastic sitting in the sunshine by the waterfront. It was wonderful. That I really like. New York City, that's a fantastic question. So I actually have a few friends in New York that are bartenders that I keep telling, hey, if you guys want the title of the best non-alc bartender in New York City, like all you have to do is call yourself the best non-alc bartender in New York City, and you will get the title because no one's claiming it yet. It's really funny.
Oh,
So
it's
you
so
probably
funny.
know people like Derek Brown, for example, who's got DC. Oh God, I'm going to butcher his name. Robert Bjorn, who's down in Austin, Texas, right? Or Grace, who I think she's based in Colorado. There are like cities that have those people that you know. New
Sure.
York, I would say I know Andres, who I used to work for Fat Tiger, which is a fully non-alcoholic speakeasy under Cabrera. He does cool stuff. And then also, I think my favorite place right now is High Lot, which is a bar, like a cocktail bar, very funky looking, like groovy looking, like 70s vibe on Avenue C in Alphabet City, like in Manhattan. And Ben Hopkins, they're doing amazing stuff with non-alc and are also very excited about experimenting. So every time I go in, I'm like, Ben, make me something fun. And Ben just like experiment. Like they sent me a message like recently, just a couple months ago, was like on a Saturday afternoon, we're like, do you have a bottle of Pathfinder at home? Could you, because I live basically across the street. Could you like come and drop
Right.
it off? I have an idea. And I was
Nice.
like, all right, I'm going to come over, bring you that Pathfinder so you can live out your like mad scientist. And there's a lot of, they make their own like syrups and everything. And
Hmm.
it always looks like a science lab a little bit in there. So yeah, so I do think like Ben does amazing stuff too. They're not sober or like doing just only non-alc, but they're really good
Right.
at just doing non-alc cocktails. They used to work for Please Don't Tell, which is a really well-known
Hmm.
cocktail bar. Yeah, but even from like
Oh
the other
yeah.
coast, used to work at
Yeah.
Please Don't Tell and are responsible for some of the NA menu at Please Don't Tell. So yeah, Ben is definitely like one of the people there. But I keep telling everyone if you want that title, like all you have to do is start making the drinks, start posting on social media, maybe run a few happy hours, like non-alc happy hours, and you got it. No one's claiming that yet in New York City, which is
Right.
awesome. My favorite cocktail, just to round that up, my favorite non-alc cocktail that I've had in New York City actually recently is at Angel's Share, which is like a Japanese style cocktail bar. And they had an NA cocktail, like the only NA cocktail on the menu, funny enough, that had tomato water in it. And just the
Ooh,
fact, I think it was
yum.
tomato water and seedlip garden. So the seedlip that tastes like a little bit grassy green.
Hmm.
And just the fact that they went, no, we're not doing a sour, because you always get a sour for non-alc.
Yeah.
Always a sour because obviously texture. Or you get like something fruity, right? Or you get maybe like a mojito or something. But the fact that they were like, no, we're going savory and weird and clear, like a clear, like spirit forward, like
Yes.
almost martini style-ish drink. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's bold and that's brave. And it was fantastic. It was wonderful. It was like really interesting.
That's
So
awesome.
that's the kind of stuff I want to see more of, is the like, yeah, let's take a stab at a martini, right? Let's not just do
Yeah.
a
That's a
seedlip
big stab.
grove and pineapple juice, where I'm like, okay, it tastes like it's pineapple juice. Yeah, so you definitely get a lot of cocktails, I would say, still, where whatever non-alc product they're using just disappears because they're overpowering with other stuff and aren't fully tuned into like how delicate and subtle a lot of those flavors are.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. I think your argument of people going towards sours and fruity is definitely one that it's an easier thing to do for sure. Clarifying stuff and making the spirits, non-alcoholic spirits, shine on their own is a challenge.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that it's such a fun time to be in this space. Being here from the Napa Valley and being raised here, I've grown up with winemakers my whole life. And they're amazing. And they can make 100-point wine and just knock it out of the park. And now my favorite thing to say to them is, okay, hot
Make
shot.
it non-alc.
Yeah, why don't you make a non-alc and make it taste good and body, and they're
Shows
getting
how
at
good
their
you really
own
are.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things, Sam, that I actually think is going to be the evolution of all of this, is that I think you're going to get to a stage where the first thing I know is that you're never going to have, let's say, Robert Mondavi serving Behringer wine, non-alcoholic wine. They're never going to serve a non-alcoholic brand that isn't their own in their own establishment. And so I think it's going to be really cool to see. In my opinion, I think it'll be really neat to see more and more actual wineries and breweries making their own non-alcoholic products for their own clientele. It's going to be a long road, but I think that's going to be really interesting to see. I love that it's always so much fun to hear what the non-alcoholic scene is like in New York or wherever these people who I have on the interview with. But I do want to like switch gears a little bit. I want to hear more about what your concept is. What is a concept for Third Place Bar? Like, where are you on this journey of opening your own place? Because that's something I've done a lot of, is opening up bars. And I just love to hear people's concepts,
Hmm.
where they are on their journey, and hear more.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So right now, I am in the I think I'm ready to pull the trigger, but I'm very scared to pull the trigger kind of phase of I think the concept is like actually makes total sense. So the idea, like initially the idea for Third Place Bar was really like creating a third place that's like a dive bar, like your local neighborhood bar. The one that you go
Nice.
to on a Tuesday just to have a drink because the bartender like who works there on Tuesdays and you shoot the shit and the regulars and it's just like your place. So the one where you stop by on your way home, like you're walking past and you're just gonna pop in and have a quick drink and say hi because someone's gonna be there. Like, or even if you don't know anyone there, you're probably gonna start chatting with the person next to you, or whatever, right? Because that's the kind of bars that I've, at least for the last, particularly for the last 10 years in New York City, like those were my third places. Like those were my home away from home when I didn't
Sure.
want to sit around by myself at home. I would go to the dive bar down the street. And it's funny because at least one of the bars I used to go to a lot when I was still living a little bit closer, it's the same bartenders. I've been working there, like, it's like
Yeah.
RPM, let's now call it Emma Pure Room, Matt, Scott, Nikki. They still work there like 10 years later. And I stopped by and I have like my athletic brew and I'm like, can you imagine that, 10 years ago when we had like a lock-in at 4 in the morning and I drank Bailey's out of your belly button, that one day I'd be sitting here drinking a non-alcoholic beer? That actually happened. Um, Hi, Matt, if
That's
you
a real
listen to
story.
this. It was good. It was
That's
fun. It was a
awesome.
good night. Um,
Yeah, it's a great night.
so that was the initial idea, and I think that works. I do
Mhm.
think, just like again, New York City is a little tough for hospitality. So just in terms of, I couldn't just run it as a bar starting at, let's say, 12 p.m. or even 5 p.m. Like, I need to make use of that space, right? Like, how am I going to pay my rent? So from a
Yeah.
financial perspective, I was basically saying, like, okay, what can I do during the daytime where I can also make enough money to pay the rent? And initially, the idea was to do like coffee shop during the day and then switch over to bar service at night, based on a coffee shop bar that used to be in my neighborhood called Spread House. Absolutely fantastic place, huge place. And they were like mostly a coffee shop, and then starting 5 p.m. they would start serving beer and wine. They were open till 11 at their peak. And it was always busy and there were always people there and it was super nice. But like some people were drinking beer and wine, but it didn't feel like a bar. It was always, the lights were dimmed and the music was maybe the tiniest bit louder, but it always felt like a cozy hangout sort of coffee shop rather than a raucous, oh yeah, like everyone's getting lit. No one was getting lit there. It was like catching up with your friend and maybe having, no, they're having a glass of wine and you're having a cup of tea kind of place. So that was like the
Mhm.
initial idea. The only problem is I don't want to run coffee. I don't want to do coffee.
Mm.
I don't want to, like, even just the thought of staffing like probably 3 shifts a day from 8 in the morning through 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, this is no.
Fuck that.
I've bartended, I've never managed a bar, I've never run a bar, I've never started a bar. I'm like, no, this is not. And I don't necessarily want a business partner to come in because all the stories I hear
Right.
about business partners never end particularly well. So that was just like, would probably be the ideal situation. And maybe at some point in a future iteration of Third Place, that's actually going to be like a full day thing. For now, I've pivoted a little bit and I'm thinking of doing a concept that's more like retail in the front. Think of like a craft beer bottle shop and bar. And we have tons of those in New York City and it actually works really well. They have like the shelves and fridges in the front, and then people can either buy stuff to go or they can pay $1 extra and then drink it at like the tables and stuff.
Hmm.
And I would get someone else to come in basically and just pay the rent for the retail space, manage the retail space. And then come 5 p.m., we'd also do like mixed drinks and open the bar and make it a little bit more bar-like. But during the day, it would be almost more like a tasting room kind of thing where people
Got
can
it.
hang out. Maybe we'll have a coffee machine, like maybe we'll have some drip coffee, right? Have meetings, meet up, meet their friends, or buy single cans of whatever drinks they want and taste them. And then come 5 o'clock, we'll switch over and maybe turn up the music a little bit, turn down the lights a little bit, have a switch over from like full retail to having a bartender, and then do that. And then stay open till 10, 11. Ideally also have events in the evening, like maybe a couple times a week. I don't want to be like every day of the week, because then it's no longer a place where you can just hang out and meet friends, because it's, oh my God, there's a comedy show on, there's a trivia
Right.
night on. I just wanted to get a drink and like maybe chat with my friend, and all of a sudden there's like all this stuff on, right? So I would limit that to maybe 2-3 nights a week at most, but really have it mostly like a space where people can
Right.
either get together, go on a date, or just have a drink before they go for dinner, have a drink on the way back home from dinner if you don't want to go home yet, go and catch up with a friend, or can really just stop by and be there by themselves, but have people around without feeling like I should be drinking alcohol. And then in addition to that, if you have the retail space, that opens up a whole new world of beverages people
Yeah.
can actually taste and try out. So the idea is there, if you have the retail, that like the tasting room aspect would also
Yeah.
encourage people, hopefully, to buy more from retail, because it's not like, oh man, I don't want to commit to buying like a whole 6-pack of that beer because I don't know if I'm going to like it, or like a 4-pack of those ready to drink cocktails that are like $7 a pop, but I can buy 1 can and I can
Right.
even drink it right there. And if I like it, I can take more home to go. So that's the idea, is to have a little bit of retail in the front, smaller version, like a condensed version
Yeah.
of a bottle shop with a lot of to-go options, like less heavy on like
Right.
the bottles of spirits, more on like the ready-to-drink cocktails, the beers, the wines maybe. Exactly. And then more like a tasting room, cafe,
Yeah.
almost bar space around that. The most important thing that I do want to have that is absolutely mandatory, I think, in that space is the actual bar, like the counter space that has enough seating, because I think that is what differentiates a coffee shop from a bar,
Got it.
and what makes bars a lot more, what's the word for it? A lot more welcoming to people talking to each other than a coffee shop where everyone just sits at their own like
Yes.
table.
Right.
Really weird. If you sit next to someone at a bar and start talking with them, makes
Yeah.
perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
So that if you're both at the counter, if you sit next to someone at a two-top in a coffee shop and then start talking to them,
Totally.
weird. Personal
Yeah.
space, right? And like the bar seating itself moves that idea of like
Really
personal,
weird.
individual
Yeah. Right.
space.
Yeah.
It's a communal, like it's literally communal
Mhm.
seating. And to me, at least, if you sit at the
Yes.
bar, that is, rather than
Yeah.
picking your own two-top at a bar, that means you're opening yourself
Mhm.
up for conversation, right? If you don't want to talk to people, you will sit on a two-top in the corner.
You're open for
If you're open
conversation.
to
Yeah.
conversation, you'll
Yeah.
sit at
Yeah.
the
Right.
bar.
Yeah.
And I think that is such an important factor and
That's it.
such a game changer. And that's what differentiates like coffee
Yeah.
shops from bars. And that's why like
Mhm.
people are like, oh, so you're not selling alcohol? Like, it's just a coffee shop. It's a cafe. And I'm like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
The bar is a concept. Bar is not like, oh, you're selling alcohol, but bar is like a function rather than it's just like a place where people consume alcohol. It
Right.
is the whole like concept of there is a bar. And it says, it's the internationally
Yeah.
recognized sign for I'm open to conversation. And I think that is so important. Yeah. And that's what I want to do. So that was a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
long
Sitting down at the bar.
description of the concept, but
Yeah. I love that. I love that. No, I loved it. It's important to get it all out there and to visualize it and describe your concept. I think it's always fun for me to talk to people at these earlier stages and then see what the actual concept ends up being and all the kind of differentiations that come along with it. I love your concept first and foremost. I think there's something really strong in the bar aspect that you're talking about. And it's really interesting. I think it'll be it's such a big, strong thing. And it's really interesting because Josh James of Ocean Beach Cafe. So I just went down there and interviewed him, and he has a very cool concept. His is very much more of a cafe, coffee shop, sandwiches with a retail component. But then he has this little speakeasy in the back that's just a full bar. And we just had this really fun conversation about the industry and where things are going. And it was just so cool to speak about how the concept that he had, just from the way it's laid out, had a specific result. And it was really interesting to hear you talk about, if you put a bar down, you're going to have this communal aspect that happens regardless if you have alcohol or not. And it's totally true. And it's really this interesting thing of, it will get people out of their comfort zone who just are enamored with drinking alcohol at all times. But at the same time, it's really going to be fun to see people evolve that place into their lineup of, I go to this place on my nightcap or on Tuesday nights, or I just love how that evolution always happens with bars and your regulars and your bartenders. There's just something really fun to talk about there. And I just love that conceptually, I think it's so interesting. At least for me, I need to have places where I can go to have that bar experience. And in the past, it was something that was really difficult for me because they didn't have non-alcoholic options. And now I find myself saying, okay, who has the best options for me and the most diversity for me to come and enjoy the bar and the experience and do that? I'm really excited that there's these concepts of non-alcoholic centric bar programs. But at the same time, I think it really does speak to, you can still have a wonderful experience at a bar, even if you're not drinking, especially now, because now there's options for you. But I think it's just going to be great to see how it all evolves. I'm really excited to see how your next 6 months and 12 months go. I think it'll be really fun to catch up and see how things go along the way. Yeah, but thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful to chat with you. I'm so excited to hear more about Third Place, and we'll definitely have to do this again soon.